The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between bills and junk mail, cream-colored parchment with gold embossing, far too elegant for my cramped mailbox in the modest apartment complex I'd called home for the past 8 years. My name, Griffin Mercer, was written in perfect calligraphy across the envelope. I knew what it was before opening it. Wesley had called last month to tell me that Eliza had finally proposed, and the wedding was set for June. But holding the physical invitation made it real in a way that our phone conversation hadn't. Wesley, my son, 26 years old now, a veterinarian with his own practice in Asheville, and about to get married. I still sometimes thought of him as the determined 7-year-old who insisted on making his own lunch for school after Karen left, claiming my peanut butter to jelly ratio was scientifically incorrect. I carefully opened the envelope and slid out the invitation. The formal text confirmed what I already knew. The ceremony would be at St. Mark's Episcopal Church, with a reception to follow at the Laurel, a renovated textile mill turned event space. My finger traced over the names: Wesley James Mercer and Eliza Catherine Donovan. A smaller card was tucked inside, requesting my RSVP. I immediately checked "will attend" without hesitation, though a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach as I did. This wouldn't be just any wedding. It would be the first time in nearly 15 years that Karen and I would be in the same room for more than a brief, awkward exchange during Wesley's college graduation. Karen had left when Wesley was 7, explaining through tears that she wasn't cut out for motherhood, that she felt suffocated, that she needed to find herself. She'd moved to Seattle, remarried, divorced again, and now lived somewhere in Colorado. Her contact with Wesley had been sporadic over the years: birthday cards, occasional phone calls, a few visits during his teen years that inevitably ended in arguments. I'd been the one who stayed, the one who learned to braid hair for Crazy Hair Day at elementary school, the one who awkwardly navigated the talk about puberty, the one who taught him to drive, helped him apply for colleges, and moved him into his first apartment. I'd been both father and mother, though I'd never claimed that title. Wesley had turned out well despite, or perhaps because of, our unconventional family. He was kind, responsible, and more emotionally intelligent than I'd ever been. Eliza was lucky to have him, and from the few times we'd met I knew he was equally lucky to have her. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Speak of the devil. Did you get it?" Wesley had written. "Just now," I replied. "Very fancy. Eliza's mom went a bit overboard with the stationery. You're coming, right? Wouldn't miss it. Already RSVP'd." There was a pause before his next message appeared. "Mom will be there too. Is that going to be okay?" I stared at the screen, carefully considering my response. Wesley didn't need the burden of managing his parents' discomfort on his wedding day. "Of course," I typed. "It's your day. We'll both be on our best behavior." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." I set my phone down and looked again at the invitation. June 17th, just over 2 months away. Plenty of time to prepare myself for seeing Karen again, for navigating the complex emotions that would inevitably arise. Plenty of time to find a decent suit, too. My last suit had been purchased for a funeral 3 years ago, and I'd lost weight since then. The invitation came with an additional request. Wesley wanted me to make a short speech at the rehearsal dinner. Nothing fancy, he'd specified when we'd spoken on the phone. Just something about Eliza joining the family. You're good with words. That was debatable. I'd been writing technical manuals for industrial equipment for 20 years. I could explain in precise detail how to safely operate a hydraulic press or troubleshoot a conveyor system, but crafting a heartfelt speech about family and love, that was unfamiliar territory. Still, I'd figure it out. That had been my parenting philosophy from the moment Karen walked out the door. Figure it out one day at a time. So far, it had worked out pretty well. I placed the invitation on my refrigerator with a magnet, a small ceramic wolf Wesley had made in 3rd grade art class. It had always been my favorite of his childhood creations, not because it was particularly good, it wasn't, but because of what it represented. "Wolves take care of their packs," he'd explained solemnly when he gave it to me. "Like you take care of me." I smiled at the memory. Wolves indeed. We'd been a pack of 2 for so long. Now our pack was growing and I couldn't be happier about it. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed quickly. Between work deadlines, shopping for a new suit, and writing and rewriting my speech, I barely had time to dwell on the looming reunion with Karen. Wesley called regularly with updates and minor crises. The florist had mixed up their order. Eliza's cousin couldn't be a bridesmaid after all. The DJ had canceled. "Everything's falling apart," he groaned during one late-night call. Not the important parts, I reminded him. You, Eliza, the license, and someone to perform the ceremony. Everything else is just details. He laughed. When did you get so wise, Dad? Around the time you decided finger painting the dog was a good idea. The Thursday before the wedding, I drove the 3 hours to Asheville, checking into a small hotel near the venue. Wesley and Eliza had offered to let me stay with them, but their modest bungalow was already overflowing with her family from out of town. Besides, I wanted my own space to decompress. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for Friday evening at a local restaurant known for its farm-to-table cuisine. I arrived early, nervously adjusting my tie as I waited outside. Wesley had texted that he and Eliza were running late. Something about their dog getting into the trash and needing an emergency bath. That's when I saw her, Karen, approaching from the parking lot. 20 years had passed since our divorce, 15 since we'd had any meaningful conversation. She looked different, yet familiar. Her once dark hair now highlighted with gray, styled in a sleek bob instead of the long waves I remembered. She wore a simple blue dress and carried herself with the same confident stride she'd always had. She spotted me and hesitated briefly before continuing toward me. I straightened, unsure of the proper greeting for an ex-wife you haven't really spoken to in over a decade. Griffin, she said, stopping a few feet away. You look well. So do you, I replied, and meant it. How was your flight? Fine. Layover in Dallas was longer than expected. She glanced at the restaurant door. Are they here yet? Running late. Dog emergency. A smile tugged at her lips. That big golden retriever? What was his name? Archimedes, I supplied, though Wesley calls him Archie. That's right. She nodded. Wesley always did love his dogs. An awkward silence fell between us. There was too much to say and no easy place to start. Years of missed moments, of separate holidays and milestones, of a chasm that had grown too wide to bridge with small talk outside a restaurant. Thankfully, Wesley's car pulled into the lot just then. He and Eliza hurried toward us, both slightly disheveled but beaming. Dad, Mom! Wesley embraced each of us in turn. Sorry we're late. Archie decided the garbage was a buffet specifically for him. Eliza, a petite woman with warm brown eyes and a quick smile, hugged me. Griffin, so good to see you again. She turned to Karen with only the slightest hesitation. And you must be Karen. I'm so glad you could make it. I had to admire her grace. Wesley had told me that she'd been apprehensive about meeting Karen, knowing the complicated history. Let's head inside, Wesley suggested, placing one arm around Eliza and gesturing us forward with the other. Everyone's waiting. The private dining room was already filled with people. Eliza's large, boisterous family, and a handful of friends from veterinary school. Wesley guided Karen and me to a table near the front, where we were joined by Eliza's parents, the Donovans. Richard Donovan, a jovial man with a salt and pepper beard, shook my hand warmly. Griffin, the man who raised our future son-in-law. Well done, sir. His wife, Marianne, kissed my cheek. We're so thrilled to finally meet you. Wesley speaks so highly of you. They greeted Karen with equal warmth, though I noticed a certain reserve in their eyes. They knew the story, or at least Wesley's version of it. Throughout dinner, I watched Karen interact with our son, the careful way she listened, her genuine laughter at his jokes, the wistfulness that occasionally shadowed her expression. Did she regret her choices? Did she wonder about the bedtime stories she hadn't read, the school plays she'd missed, the graduation she'd attended as a visitor rather than a constant presence? It wasn't my place to judge. We all make our choices and live with the consequences. Wesley had turned out wonderfully despite, or perhaps because of, our unorthodox family structure. That was what mattered in the end. When it came time for speeches, Richard Donovan went first, welcoming Wesley to the family with heartfelt words and good-natured jokes. Then it was my turn. I stood unfolding the notes I'd prepared, then promptly set them aside. When Wesley was 10, I began instead. He came home from school and announced he was going to be a veterinarian. Not because he loved animals, though he did, but because, and I quote, "Dogs never judge you when your family is different." I smiled at Wesley, who nodded, remembering. That wisdom from a 10-year-old taught me something important. Family isn't about conforming to some ideal. It's about acceptance, support, and unconditional love. I raised my glass. Eliza, thank you for loving my son exactly as he is. Welcome to our unconventional, imperfect, but deeply loving family. Wesley, I couldn't be prouder of the man you've become. As I sat down to applause, I caught Karen's eye. For a brief moment, something passed between us. Acknowledgement, perhaps, of our shared history and the remarkable young man who connected us still. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, the June sun warming the Blue Ridge Mountains surrounding Asheville. I spent extra time getting ready, making sure my new charcoal suit fit properly, and my tie, a subtle blue Wesley had selected to match the wedding colors, was straight. Today wasn't about me or Karen or our complicated past. It was about Wesley and Eliza, about celebrating their love and commitment. St. Mark's Episcopal Church was a historic stone building with stained glass windows that cast rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. I arrived early, as was my habit, and found myself helping the ushers arrange programs and direct early guests to their seats. Mr. Mercer. Eliza's younger sister Olivia waved me over to a side room. Wesley's asking for you. I followed her to a small anteroom where Wesley stood before a mirror, struggling with his bow tie. His fingers fumbled with the fabric, his frustration evident. I can't get this right, he muttered when he saw me. My hands keep shaking. Pre-wedding jitters, I said, stepping in to help. Perfectly normal. As I adjusted the tie, I noticed the subtle signs of his nervousness, the slight furrow between his brows, the way he kept taking deep breaths, the continuous tapping of his right foot, the same tells he'd had since childhood. Everything okay? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Besides the tie situation, yeah, just, he exhaled slowly. It's a big day. Important. I don't want to mess anything up. I finished with the tie and placed my hands on his shoulders, meeting his eyes in the mirror. You won't. But even if something doesn't go according to plan, it won't matter in the long run. Trust me. Did you feel this way when you married Mom? The question caught me off guard. Wesley rarely asked about my marriage to Karen. Yes, I answered honestly. Terrified and excited all at once. It's normal, son. He nodded, seeming to take comfort in this. Thanks for being here, Dad. For everything. The moment was interrupted by the wedding coordinator announcing it was time to take our places. I hugged Wesley quickly and headed to the front of the church, where I would be seated in the first pew on the groom's side. Karen was already there, looking elegant in a pale green dress. He looks so handsome, she whispered as I sat beside her. You did a wonderful job with him, Griffin. Before I could respond, the music changed, signaling the start of the ceremony. Wesley and his best friend Marcus entered from the side and took their places at the altar. The bridesmaids processed in pairs, followed by Olivia as maid of honor. Then the traditional wedding march began, and everyone stood as Eliza appeared on her father's arm, radiant in a classic white gown. The priest, Father Michaels, welcomed everyone warmly and began the ceremony. Everything proceeded smoothly until he reached a particular section of the traditional service. Who gives this woman to be married to this man? He asked, following the script. Richard Donovan responded clearly. Her mother and I do. Father Michaels nodded approvingly, then looked around with slight confusion. Departing from his prepared text, he asked, And where is the mother of the groom? A murmur rippled through the congregation. Karen shifted uncomfortably beside me. Before either of us could respond, Wesley turned and without hesitation pointed directly at me. Right there, he said firmly. That's my parent. The church fell silent. Father Michaels blinked, momentarily flustered, then recovered. Of course, he said, and continued with the ceremony. I stood frozen, emotion washing over me in waves. In that simple gesture, Wesley had acknowledged what we both knew but rarely verbalized, that parenthood isn't defined by gender or biology, but by presence and love. I felt Karen's hand on my arm, a gentle squeeze that conveyed what words couldn't. When I glanced at her, there were tears in her eyes and a sad smile on her lips. She understood too. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. Vows were exchanged, rings were given. A kiss sealed the marriage. Throughout it all, I remained acutely aware of that singular moment of recognition, my son's public declaration that transcended conventional definitions of family. As Wesley and Eliza processed back down the aisle as husband and wife, Wesley caught my eye and gave me a small, knowing nod. In that moment, I realized that sometimes the greatest affirmations come not from grand speeches, but from simple truths spoken without hesitation. The reception at the Laurel was everything Wesley and Eliza had hoped for, elegant but relaxed, with twinkling lights strung across exposed wooden beams and tables adorned with wildflowers. As guests enjoyed cocktails and hors d'oeuvres, I found a quiet moment to step onto the venue's stone patio overlooking the mountains. There you are. Karen's voice came from behind me. She held 2 champagne flutes, offering one to me. I thought you might need this. I accepted the glass with a nod of thanks. We stood side by side, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. What Wesley did in there, she began, her voice soft. That was significant. Yes, I agreed. unsure what else to say. Karen turned to face me fully. He was right, you know. You've been both mother and father to him. She took a sip of champagne, her eyes never leaving mine. I used to tell myself that he had two parents who loved him just in different ways, that my absence wasn't really abandonment because you were there, providing everything he needed. The candor of her words surprised me. In all our brief interactions over the years, we'd never spoken this directly about her departure. It was easier to believe that, she continued, than to face what I'd really done. But today, seeing you with him, watching how he looks at you, I can't hide from it anymore. Karen, no, let me finish, please. She set her glass down on the stone balustrade. I missed everything, Griffin. First dates, driving lessons, heartbreaks, celebrations. I told myself I wasn't cut out for motherhood, but the truth is I was just scared. Scared of failing, scared of being trapped, scared of not being enough. And in trying to avoid those fears, I created exactly what I was afraid of. I failed him. I considered her words carefully before responding. Wesley doesn't see it that way. He's never seen it that way. Because you never encouraged him to, she said. You could have poisoned him against me. Most people would have. But instead, you left the door open for our relationship, complicated as it is. She wasn't wrong. I'd been careful never to speak ill of Karen to Wesley, to present her choices as her own without judgment attached. Not out of any nobility, but because I believed Wesley deserved to form his own opinions about his mother. When Father Michaels asked that question today, I said, I expected Wesley to point to you. Karen shook her head, a sad smile playing at her lips. I didn't. I knew exactly what he would do. He's always known who was really there for him. The reception coordinator appeared at the door, signaling that we were needed inside for the entrance of the newlyweds. As we turned to go, Karen touched my arm lightly. Thank you, she said simply, for being what I couldn't. Inside, Wesley and Eliza were announced as husband and wife, entering the reception to applause and cheers. Wesley's eyes found mine across the room and he smiled. The same smile I'd seen on his first day of kindergarten, at his high school graduation, when he was accepted to veterinary school. A smile that contained our shared history and mutual understanding. Family isn't always what you expect it to be. Sometimes it's created in unexpected circumstances, forged through challenges and defined not by traditional roles, but by unconditional love and unwavering presence. Wesley had understood that long before today's ceremony, before his pointed gesture in the church. He'd always known who his mother was, and today he made sure everyone else knew too.